Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Proko live stream. Today we got Bryan Mark Taylor, really awesome fine art painter, mostly landscapes, right?
Yeah, cityscapes within that kind of
environment.
Yeah,
all sorts of. And do you mostly do plein air or from photos nowadays?
Well, now I usually go on some trip somewhere in the world.
Yeah,
just plein air painting, and then I come back for 6 months and kind of digest what I just experienced.
That's awesome.
It takes time to kind of go through the material and all those notes that I do with plein air. Those color notes, color studies are really important to inform me, in the studio. But I'm less of a go and tour, do one plein air conference or plein air competition after another.
Yeah,
I probably did about 100 of them from 2005 to 2015, and I seriously totally burned out on all of that, and tired of the rat race a little bit.
Yeah, I saw you at every fine art convention and competition I think I went to, so you were there. That's cool. So anyway, Bryan has a painting that he recorded that we're going to be playing here while we're answering the questions from the community. And so if you guys want to ask questions, just go to proko.com/544 right there, and type in your questions, and we'll have a little chat. And Bryan, is there anything that you I know you wanted to promote Vision X Live, right? And anywhere else they could find your stuff? Is it just Instagram or?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously my website, bryanmarktaylor.com.
Got it. Okay, there you go.
I got 3 first names, so it's
3 first names. Wait, no, that's not
Mark.
Oh, well, yeah, got it. Okay, but those are is Mark your middle name?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yep. Cool. Yeah. So all the usual channels and stuff like that. I think Instagram is probably my most go-to active place. Also, I own a company that does plein air equipment called Strata Easel, and
very good easel.
We have those people painting on them all around the world. So you can see on Facebook our channel there to see who's painting what. So I'm really into painting from life and kind of interacting with people all over the place, and both still life or indoors as well as out. So I do a lot of still life stuff as well as traveling and painting.
Yeah. I really like your kind of loose plein air style. Like I remember when I saw your boats. You did your boats. I don't know how many years ago that was. But that's when I really was like, oh man, this guy's awesome. And I started following your stuff. Where was that, in China or Singapore? Yeah. Where was that?
So I went to southern China.
Okay.
For about 6 years ago, I think 6 or 7 years ago, and been back about 4 or 5 times. Different areas of China. Just one of those places that it's so different from growing up in the U.S. and in the West. Yeah. I love the degree of stuff that's on those boats. They just have so many things, and I found that more as I travel, whether it's there or Cuba, India, a lot of countries in the developing world, there's just a lot of gnarly, interesting stuff that you can you paint, and I find that I've gravitated more towards that than maybe the what I call the rock tree cloud painters.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, which is
there's a difference.
It's awesome, but I tend to like to have something that has a little grittier quality to it. See where the majority of humanity lives and works, and all of that.
Yeah.
So, I love cultures. I love meeting new people, trying to learn a little bit of the language wherever I go.
Oh, nice.
So I speak fluent Italian, but I try with some of the Latin languages. But I tell you what, China or India were just so tough to learn.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because you can't sound out. You can't look at a word and sound it out. It's totally different. You know,
totally different. Yeah, you get away from the Latin-based languages, and
yeah,
it can be tough. But we try. I've gotten better at just random sign language. When you're trying to point to stuff and use your phone and things like that. But I love getting out there in the wilderness somewhere and finding these places. So those boats, I actually found a New York Times article talked about these boat. They're kind of boat cities or boat villages, and the Chinese government's kind of getting rid of all of them. They want to kind of clean up the rivers, and so they're taking those boats off the water and putting them in kind of high rises.
Really? So no more like fishing villages?
Not like it used to be. Nope. Okay. There used to be thousands and thousands of boats down there, and just even in the 4 years that I went to China, they would be reduced by half every time I went.
That's a shame.
That's one of the kind of themes that I've been working on, is vanishing landscapes, things that are just disappearing. Same thing happening with small farms across the United States.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
what are they putting? Are they putting in high rises where farms are, or are they just putting in like residential
cookie cutter house thing, or
residential,
malls, or 7-Eleven? That's kind of what we're replacing all of that stuff with.
Okay. I'm just telling John to start playing the video once it's ready. I know he's still trying to download it, I guess. But yeah, we're gonna start playing Bryan's demo really shortly here, and it's gonna be one of those gritty, kind of messy. It's an alleyway, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, with just like a lot of clutter, and then when you do that, you try to kind of make some kind of order from it, right?
Absolutely.
you have to design it. Okay, so we'll talk about it once the painting starts, but
yeah. No, you can't take it as is. There's tangents all over the place.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and then probably too, like, with color as well, right? Like there's just too much color, or no, or just the lighting will even everything out, or unify everything. Or
in this case, yes, to a degree, but I'll talk about, I'm going to actually shift the entire palette in a direction.
Oh, okay, cool.
In order to kind of give it a feeling. Obviously the color is not going to be right in the photograph. It's not going to be how I saw it or how it felt. So,
but I'm talking about even just like individual items. You, like, let's say you got like an old suitcase, in the corner, and it's bright red, but you're like, well, I don't want to like bring attention to that. You'll change the color of that, right? Absolutely. You'll totally modify the whole scene.
Yeah, local color's very overrated, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Cool. Well, I'll start some questions before the video is ready here. Well, one person asked, is it digital or oil?
Yeah, it's gonna be oil.
It's oil. Do you do any digital?
Just a little bit. Actually, I have it in my process. I use a little bit of iPad. I'll photograph my painting and then manipulate it to see like a bunch of different choices. Go in this direction or that direction. And it's just a quick way of trying to figure out, without actually going into the oil, how to solve some problems. But usually I start a painting more intuitively at the beginning. And you'll see here, I won't do a preliminary sketch or anything. I'll just start with a big brush and then kind of work my way through the piece.
Nice. Okay. Oh. This is a very specific technical question. What's the difference between linseed oil medium and gel medium, like Gamblin or Linquin? I mean,
okay, well, that depends, because the linseed oil is just natural, right? It's something that's not going to kill you. Some of those gel mediums, like Liquin, can be toxic. They dry faster for the most part, and that's why people really like them. Also, they have a certain slickness that people like. Linseed oil can have maybe a little bit more of a tacky quality. So it just depends on what you're after, what kind of technique. If you want something to feel more wet and wet, probably using little more Gamsol and a little half and half Gamsol linseed oil would probably be better. You can get that real slick feeling at the first. And you'll see just in the piece that I do, I'm adding a lot of Gamsol at the beginning, and it'll almost feel like watercolor. And then slowly I'll add a little bit of linseed oil as I build up the painting. But I tend to, unless I am under a deadline and in a rush, I don't use those liquids or even the Gamblin Neo Miguel, or there's a couple other little varieties of the Galkid Light. I find those things to be a little obnoxious, a little too shiny. Even the liquid a little too shiny. But if I have to, and it's winter and it has to be dry, and I have a deadline or a painting that has to go to a gallery or whatever, I'll for those purposes. But like in summer, linseed oil dries plenty fast. So you can just, I would recommend using that unless you have a real well ventilated area, or if you're out plein air painting, you can throw that stuff on there. I would still kind of avoid liquid personally. It seems from a lot of artists that I've talked to, that's the one that seems to cause sensitivity over time. People like get really itchy, or
oh really? Okay.
I have a friend that John Poon, he went to the hospital because of it. Part of it at the Academy of Art University, where I went to school, did my grad program, and also did some teaching there. Just the fumes, liquid was like everywhere, and it just give you the big headache after a while.
How do they narrow it down? Like if you go to the hospital from using it for years, how do you know that, like, oh, that's the product I was using that caused it?
Part of it is just you got to remove it out of your studio and try that for a week and see how you feel.
Okay.
So if I have liquid in a studio environment, I know it's just gonna give me a headache.
Okay, got it. You could feel it immediately. It's not
pretty, yeah. Within the first 10 minutes, you're just like,
okay,
there it is again. So
got it.
I think at the Academy of Art, I think they banned. I mean, not an official ban or that, but generally speaking, discourage using the liquid.
Yeah.
So that's why Gamblin came out with the kind of that. It's like an oil gel, which is basically a jellified linseed oil, and that gelled linseed oil is what people are using now as a substitute to the Galkids and the liquids and all that.
So it's just like a processed linseed oil. They don't add anything to it.
Yeah, they chemically did something to it to get work, in a kind of a gel format.
Cool.
So it tends to work okay. I don't use it a lot, but occasionally I will use it. I won't glaze with it because it's a little too shiny. But
yeah,
I'd rather do just straight linseed oil to glaze a painting. And again, more of what I do is a direct painting method rather than kind of building up in layers or in kind of that academic fashion where maybe they'll do a grisaille first and layer over the top of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's similar to like the turpentine versus the Gamsol. Like I know at Watts Atelier where I studied, they did ban turpentine. You could not bring turpentine into the studio because everybody in the studio would be like, what is that? Close that, please.
Right.
And some people are allergic as well. So
yeah, absolutely. That's nasty stuff.
It's like, yeah, it's like gas, right?
Yeah. Well, and I know some atelier programs are, if it's not the real stuff that Da Vinci used, I'm not going to use it. So there's a kind of a certain mindset there. I'm not one of those people that are like, I need to cut the tree down and dry it in a kiln and make my stretcher bars and weave my canvas and stuff like that. I know there are people out there, and that's great. For me, it's all about creating the piece. And so I rely on other people that know what they're doing to make those materials.
Yeah. Yeah, they're stuck trying to be like someone else if they're trying to do everything like Da Vinci. Would Da Vinci try to be like someone else?
I doubt it.
Yeah, so what the hell? Follow Da Vinci's mentality.
Yeah, embrace it all.
All right. Next one's from Ola. She's saying, I'm trying to get into this style of drawing. Lifestyle or real life or something else. I don't know what it's called exactly. So how do I start? I guess I'm not sure exactly what she's asking. Either still life or life, painting from life, or plein air, which is outdoor painting from life. Right. But probably doesn't matter. How do you start? Is the answer is probably the same for all of those, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, you're going to want to have a fundamental education,
right?
Because you're going to go outdoors and just be completely overwhelmed. There's so much information out there. Yeah. And you can even see in the image that I'm going to be painting that it has just so much going on. You have to really be selective, simplify, edit out a lot of things in order to make it work. And so kind of an understanding of that really starts with understanding, life drawing. Painting and drawing from life as much as possible, indoors as well as out, so that you can be able to capture things in a fairly quick way. That's another skill. If you want to do that kind of life, capture a moment of life, you do need to develop a technique that allows you to capture it very quickly. So like in this painting process, or in general painting, when I go outdoors in plein air, 2 hours is the maximum amount of time that I spend on a piece.
Really?
That's because the light changes so quickly.
Okay.
And you're going to have a totally different looking scene, and it's not worth continuing to work on something that is going to be changing. So you develop your technique in a way that allows you to capture things accurately and rapidly. And so you'll see the technique that I use. I can capture things very quickly. There's not like some huge laborious drawing that I have to do at first. I'm really looking at the pattern of light and shadow, and I'm not capturing maybe all kinds of little details and stuff, but the general feeling of light and mood is what I'm after. And so when you're looking at that kind of life experience type painting, it's less linear and more kind of shape oriented and value relationship oriented.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You mentioned that the light changes too much, and so you limit it to 2 hours. What about like on a cloudy day? Does it still change too much? 'Cause I've been able to paint for 3-4 hours sometimes, and it was still similar.
Yeah. No, if you get it really, so on the coast, say you're in Point Carlos or somewhere, and you get that nice gray fog, it does allow you to have a longer time period for sure to paint if you want to. There is still a color temperature change as the sun moves. So those things are really slight. And so if you do want to paint with longer sessions, obviously you could do the Monet thing and come, same time every day and do it for successive days. Or
isn't that different too? Because every day is
well, that's the thing. Yeah. So that's the same thing with Overcast Light. Sometimes it's warmer, sometimes it's cooler.
That's true.
And so as long as you stay to your kind of initial vision, that temperature relationship, and those temperature relationships are very subtle in Overcast Light, then you'll have that nice consistency even if you worked on it 6 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, because you could establish the overall feel in the first 45 minutes, an hour or whatever, and then the rest of it is all just putting in details, but keeping the color temperatures and the whole composition that you've already defined, right? Yeah,
and to some degree that can make painting in Overcast Light a little bit easier, where you have a little bit more time. Also, the shadows aren't moving as much, right? There's a lot more color subtlety and maybe the subtlety of form as it turns. You get that softness. And so that's a little trickier maybe than the hard like light shadow patterns that you see on a sunny day.
Yeah.
So it has its strengths. I personally like to paint in Overcast Light more than I like to paint in maybe a sunset light. Just because of the the subtlety of it. You know, those colors, the grays.
Yeah.
I tend to like painting those more than, you know, really bright sunsetty kinds of things.
Yeah. Cool. John says 5 more minutes.
It's a huge file, I guess.
It is a huge file. He's trying to. He started downloading it. He remoted into our office instead, so that he could download it quicker.
Okay.
We could start playing it off your computer and then just switch, because you could fast forward, rewind, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you know, while John gets it ready, so there's no pressure. We could see how it is off yours. Maybe the internet got faster.
Okay. So let's see.
Oh, I think John might. Does John have to share your screen? Or you share your screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Click share. We're sharing the video file.
There you go. Okay, cool. So let's start this thing. Actually, it looks a lot better now than it was when we were testing. I could actually see the paint. Cool. Okay. Nice.
All right.
Yeah. We'll have John as a backup then. If it starts to get too compressed, we'll switch to John's when it's ready.
Okay.
Awesome. Cool. So tell us about, like, any thoughts on this?
Yeah. So at the beginning here, what I'm using is a little bit of a mixture of the ultramarine blue, and actually let me go over the palette real quick. So clockwise, going around from titanium white, I've got cad yellow, Indian yellow, cad orange, cad red light, alizarin permanent, transparent oxide red, ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, king's blue, and then I think the one at the bottom there, it's probably chromatic black. That's
chromatic black. Wait, what chroma is it? Is it bluish or?
So it is slightly. Basically, what it is it's phthalo green and alizarin permanent mixed together in like perfect equal amounts, and so it really comes out quite gray, quite neutral. Surprising.
Okay. Yeah. Does it mix with colors? Like if you mix it with white, it just comes out gray?
Yeah, pretty spot on gray. You know, although once you start adding like lean it green or lean it red, it really quickly goes one direction or the other.
Interesting.
So it's a little more flexible, I think, than your typical lamp black or, you know, some other blacks. Plus it's also very transparent, which is really
okay
for black. So it doesn't have that kind of heavy-handed 19th century vibe that, you know, kind of can feel dead in some paintings.
Does it dry a little more shiny? Because I know ivory black just dries like it's got dust on it.
Totally. That's what I hate about it.
Okay, so this solves that.
It solves that issue.
Oh, nice. Okay, I'll have to get some.
Yeah, so that's a Gamblin product.
Cool.
So with the paints, what I'm doing, I'm adding a little bit of Gamsol into it, so it's very thin. And I'm also using a smooth surface here, so it is very slick. Well, slick's maybe not the word, maybe an eggshell surface, gessoed panel. And that allows me to kind of go rather quickly over the surface without having to grind in, you know, or scrub in with the paint. I'm also using actually a watercolor brush here, a 1-inch watercolor brush. So the size of this piece is 18 by 24.
And can you tell people the difference? Watercolor brush, oil brush?
Yeah, watercolor brush tends to not be quite as stiff. You know, holds water better. I'm using kind of a synthetic brush here in this particular demo. And I like its kind of flat nature. It holds its shape really well, at least until it doesn't, and then I throw it away. You know, as long as it's got that really fine point to it.
Is it still more like a bristle, or is it like a synthetic sable?
Synthetic. It's more like a sable kind of feel to it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I'm doing with the whole painting, you can see the reference. I'm actually pushing the entire thing a little bit more in a red direction. And one of the reasons I'm doing that is if you look at the figure that's kind of in the distance there, in the photo reference, you can see the person has kind of a green cloak to it. And so what I'm doing is just kind of a real basic red-green palette. And I always try and think of things in terms of their, you know, just the big compliments in a scene like this, so that I don't get carried away with too many color choices, because you can see there's like some garbage on the ground there with this really strong blue. There's the green on the side edge of the image, and there's also bits of strong yellow, strong red, strong green. So if I add all of those, just like you kind of mentioned at the beginning, the local color, you're going to draw your eye all over the place, and it's not going to be or feel cohesive. So we want to make sure that it has a kind of a cohesive quality to it.
I noticed you're starting with, I mean, obviously like a reddish brown. So like, it's not there in the photo, right? Are you using that as a preliminary layer that you're going to cover up, and you just want some of that to show through? You just want warmth to be underneath that?
Yeah.
Okay, and why?
But it also will, well, there's two reasons. So one is, and that's a good question. It's always better to start the underpainting warm, because you're going to avoid making your painting look dead.
Okay. Why does cool underpaint make it dead?
So very often when you're trying to add warmth over cool, it just, the natural kind of chemical nature of, when you're adding white to things, you're lightening things up. It naturally cools them anyway. So you're going to be fighting that cooling effect, and then so you're going to be adding more warmth into those mixtures in order to compensate for that cooling of the white.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that's going to do is, with that warm saturation over the top, and you have this kind of dark, cold color underneath, it just doesn't. It just looks kind of like dried blood.
Okay, got it. Now, I want to get your opinion on this. If I add white to cobalt blue, does it cool the cobalt blue, or does it warm it up?
Well, cool. That's a great question. If a tree falls in the wilderness, does anybody care? Anyway, yeah.
Well, I'm just curious, because I mean, you say white warms it up. Do you mean white cools it off? Do you mean when you add white to a warm color, it'll cool it off, or when you add white to any color? Because I mean, you got two sides of it.
So in my opinion, is orange is your warmest color on your palette. Blue is your coolest color on the palette. Mm-hmm. White sits close to blue as a cooling agent.
Okay, so it's closer to cool than it is to warm. It's not in the middle.
Right. And that's why sometimes I'll mix, or I'll have on my palette an intentional warm white or a cool white. If I'm painting an overcast light, just to speed up the process, I'll get a cool white. So white that has a little bit of blue already mixed in it. So that can even push things a little bit cooler. Or, if I'm painting sunset light, it already has a little bit of, yellow or ochre or something in it to push things a little bit warmer, or counteract the cooling effect of that white. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. But yeah, to answer that question, I think it's a good question too. That does white cool blue down? And I'd say no, because it desaturates it,
right,
and takes kind of the bite out of the coldness. Mm-hmm.
Cool, or not cool.
So that's one of the reasons why. And Richard Schmid talked about this in his book, is that one of the reasons why he likes painting in overcast light is that.
Oh, what happened with the video? It went back.
On my end, can you see it?
Yeah, but it went back to the beginning. Oh, now it's not.
I don't know. I didn't touch anything.
Weird. That was weird. I don't know if everybody else saw it, but on my screen it went back to the beginning, and now it's back to where it was before. So.
No, it did mine too.
Okay. Well, it's back. Okay. Cool. Keep going. Sorry.
It's back. Yeah. So as far as the, let's see, where were we? We were with the overcast light. Okay. So Richard Schmid talked about, he loved painting overcast light because he could have that warm, he loves transparent oxide red, right? And that's what he would use kind of as a base in a lot of his paintings. And then, and he liked that, when you're adding white and opaque passages over the top, naturally they'd cool. And that's also what's happening in nature, is that cool light from the canopy of the sky is coming down on these objects and cooling them anyway. and so it kind of works with your mixtures.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of an easier, more natural way to work.
Got it. So you're pretty far along in this painting already. Like I'm seeing objects on the left there. You're defining top planes and stuff. You wanna update us on your thought process at this moment?
Okay, so what I did at the very beginning is kind of look at the big shapes, right? It's kind of this little tunnel with this archway in the back, and those are the main two areas that I'm dealing with right now. So establishing that dark at the beginning made it easy to figure out where the lights were. So kind of that general dark passage in the roof area, just getting that and ignoring all the details. I'm just looking at the major surfaces. So if I were to sculpt this, in a 3D program, there would just be, those walls and the floor. And then that archway is how I'd sculpt it. And then at that point, as I'm kind of working on those main areas, those main value relationships and color value relationships, then I can kind of start working from that kind of center point, the archway, and then move outward from there. And so kind of that's where I'm at this point. And so even I'm starting to put some of those cool notes that we talked about over the top of kind of that reddish color. And by throwing those things on there, we now have this kind of dynamic between the warm and the cool. We wouldn't feel that coolness as much if I only had a cool underneath. There wouldn't be that kind of vibration, that dynamic between the two. So you can see one of the things I'm doing with the brush strokes as well. I'm not noodling a lot or tiny little strokes. I'm placing it for the most part and leaving it.
Yeah.
And a big part of what I'm trying to capture here is that similar feeling that I get when I go and paint on location, is that immediacy, the freshness of the brushwork.
Yeah.
It's really easy to over-render and overwork a lot of this stuff.
That's one of my favorite things about your paintings is how they look confident, they have energy. You didn't, you like you said, you don't noodle over like little details and try to make everything perfect. It's just kind of spontaneous, confident.
Yeah, and so the goal is to make it feel alive, not try and hide the fact that it's a painting.
Yeah.
Right. So, and there's some areas that I'll refine just a little bit here and there where I really want my eye to go. But I'm not a camera. I'm not going to have everything sharp, side to side, top to bottom. I'm going to sharpen areas that are important where I want the eye to go and soften other areas even beyond what I see. So this that softening and sharpening will happen in key areas. And what I need to be able to do is those really loose areas need to hold up next to some of those refined areas. And one of the ways to do that is to have that kind of energy and that kind of passion behind those initial strokes. And then they're combined with maybe a little bit more refinement in certain areas. And that combination is something that, I find interesting. It's an abstract quality.
Now, did you always paint really loose like this? Or did you ever, as a student have the issue that I think almost most students that I come across, including myself, tend to try to get everything perfect if we're drawing from reference or painting from reference. And were you ever like that, or was this is kind of just your natural way to do it?
I was always naturally one of those people that.
Damn it.
Yeah. They wouldn't, like even following a recipe, it's really hard for me. I want to kind of wing it, throw a few little things in there.
Okay.
A little bit of a temperament thing. That doesn't mean I still feel like I can really, do something really tightly rendered if I needed to. Occasionally I'll do a demonstration for some people where they like, I want to see this like really tight, and so I'll do it. But my initial temperament has always been kind of that loosey sort of feeling to it. And maybe it's just kind of the joy of actually how the painting process feels when you're doing it. And the tempo. Tempo is a big part of it too. Like you can see, I'm moving rather quickly, making decisions very fast. If it's wrong, I'll touch the canvas and then just quickly make that adjustment based on what I see there, and then keep moving forward like that. So and some people don't like that. They don't like that feeling of not having control. And for me, I don't like that control. And so even like in the brush, I hold it at the end. This is a shorter brush that I'm using. It's a watercolor brush. I wish it had a longer handle, and if it did, I'd be holding it at the very end of the brush, because I want less control. So you don't hold it like a pencil. You hold it, out far.
Yeah.
So that's an important part of it. The other thing is, I'm using, for the most part, I'll do the majority of this painting with, that single brush. And
oh, really? Do you just wipe a lot and clean it with the Gamsol?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that's one of the things too that can kind of keep the whole painting cohesive in terms of its values and color, is if I'm using that same brush too and kind of mixing in these pools, as long as I'm not overworking it or overthinking some of these passages, which I think is easy to do as a young student, is you kind of go in and then, oh, that's not right, then do it again, and that's not right, and do it again, that's not right. Then you get total muddy mess. But I find that I don't have those same, concerns, because I don't go over and overlick the canvas. And so even if a little bit of the contamination from some of the other mixtures in the palette get in there, I find that just adds that kind of variety and that natural quality to the work. Kind of that patina that would happen naturally also in a scene like this. There's dirt that's kind of covered, and dust and things that have kind of covered everything anyway. And so that's kind of what's going on. Now, if I wanted to bump something up color-wise at the end, then the painting would be slightly dry. I could go with a clean palette, and it would kind of come together with a strong stroke at the end. Looks like we're. Is it still streaming okay here?
Yeah, it is. I think. Your audio is dropping every once in a while, so I'm asking John if he could start. So what's your time code right now on the video?
Let's see. It is. 1 second.
Oh, never mind. Wait, he said that it's already. It's already on ours. John already switched it over. Interesting. Okay.
Okay, so that's why I went back and then forward again.
That's what John switched it out without telling us. Got it. Well, okay, so that's ours.
That was natural.
But yeah, your audio is still dropping out every once in a while. I don't know if you're still sharing your screen. If you are, you can stop it. But
okay, let me see. I don't know how to unshare it here.
Maybe you're not sharing anymore. Maybe he stopped it, but it'd be at the bottom. There's a little share button.
Oh, yeah.
What?
It seems like
it stopped.
Seems like it's going okay. It stopped. Yeah, I took it off. We're good now.
Okay, good. I think your audio is better now. Cool. So let me go ask another question while if that's okay, or while I look for a question, maybe if there's anything else you want to mention. You want to talk about actually Vision X Live real quick, because I know that you got this convention coming up, and it's the first year of it. I don't know too much about it because I've never been to one, because it's never happened before, right? So there's nobody else really knows what this thing is going to be except you and the partners that you're working with. So could you tell us what is your vision for for Vision X Live? What is this? What's going to set it apart? Why is it special?
Okay. Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think a big part of it is So I've been to a lot of different conventions. The Lightbox, plein air conventions. I've been to LuxCon, Comic-Con.
Yeah.
And they're all great. They're all wonderful. One thing that I found, though, is that fine art has they're a little compartmentalized from all of this entertainment stuff that's going on.
Okay.
And
even at plein air con?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's like
really?
one or two people that know how to do digital work, or it's like Mike Fernandez.
Okay, got it. So you're trying to combine the two. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So that those worlds are talking together a little bit more. And even like say at Lightbox, there are maybe 5 fine artists that show up.
Right. Am I one of those, or I'm more of a school, huh? I don't think I can.
You're an island.
Yeah.
So when I go to like Lightbox, like not a lot of people know who I am. I don't know a lot of people there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there could be a lot more dialogue between those worlds, and having some of those people that I know, like Mike Hernandez, or even like a Dylan Cole, is somebody who has taken up plein air painting and had some interest in the fine art area. And also we have somebody like William Ray, who's much more of a fine artist, but he also does some things for like SpongeBob or Love, Death and Robots, and he's kind of a crossover type person. And so what we're inviting more of a dialogue between the fine arts and the entertainment artists. And I think because everybody's kind of enjoying each other from afar, but really not coming together in a more kind of dynamic way. And so that's a big part of what Vision X Live is going to be about, is kind of that dialogue between. It'll be a little heavier on the fine arts side, and also, but not just one type of fine art. So like there's been Realism Live, and there's been plein air, like I said. But there's no conference for artists that are doing something like just really creative, kind of their own brand, like artists like the Obanoth. Or you have Alyssa Mies, Chet Zar, who is into the dark arts. There's Zoe Frank, who blends abstraction with realism.
Wow, I haven't heard of any of these artists. You're gonna need to send me a list so we could put these in under the video or something.
Okay, so,
yeah.
Well, we've got the entire program. I'll send you a link. The entire program of 100 artists that are presenting.
Oh, so all the ones you mentioned.
These are fantastic artists that are showing in major galleries.
Yeah. Sorry, all the ones you just mentioned.
They're all coming to Vision X Live.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. And look at that little banner we got scrolling across. I think John just figured out how to add that.
That's awesome.
In, and he's messing around.
How to do that?
That's funny. Cool.
That's
okay, so yeah, if you guys
at an NBA game like that.
That's right. Yeah, all the stats. So yeah, if you guys want to attend, I'll be there. I'll be doing. Am I doing 2 or 3? I'm doing 3 panels, right? Yeah, I'm doing 3 panels, I believe. No, 2. Shoot, I forgot.
You're doing advanced anatomy, and then you're going to be on the panel for the future of art education. With,
and there's
Bobby
no third
Chu, Sahil Lavinia. There's a third one too that you're going to be on.
No, I can't. I thought it was 3, but I don't remember the third one. So I don't think there is a third one. So I'm doing those 2. That's okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
The other part about it is we're running this more like it's going to be like a TED conference in a way, where like some big ideas are being shared about kind of the future of the art world. We have some prominent galleries and gallery directors that are going to be talking, as well as curators. So there's going to be kind of a little bit stronger intellectual flavor, aside from all the technique and everything that's going to be shown as well. So that'll be kind of a fun part of it. A little highbrow with everything else in between. So that's another unique aspect to this conference.
Nice. Okay. All right. Well, let's get another question here. So John, not our John, another John asks, is it? What was that? Okay. Is it more important to remain true to the reference, or do you take liberties? If so, is it about the feel of a place, or simply what looks good to you?
Well, there's a little bit of both, but obviously you're trying to capture the feel, the light, and the mood of the place. The reference, in my opinion, is a departure point. Now,
that's a good way.
I think for years I studied, just trying to see an image and kind of look at it. And I know some artists continue to do that. There's an artist like Mark D'Alessio who's all about site size, and a lot of people are into this whole site size thing where they, put their painting right at eye level, and they're out on location. They got to find the perfect spot, and then their goal is just to capture it so well that it looks like it's when they take the photo on YouTube or on Instagram, it looks like the painting blends into the background, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not what I'm after.
Yeah.
And we clap at that. Good job. You copied what's behind it. Personally, I don't want to be a Xerox machine. I want to be an experience, something to bring an experience, move things around. And again, that's one of the reasons why, like at Vision X, I wanted to bring some of the concept artists and the fine artists together, is because they're both about trying to create a new thing based on certain elements. They move things around, they change reality according to their needs. And I think a little bit more of a dialogue between these two groups is going to be interesting dynamic, because I know to some degree the fine artists can have a little bit of their nose in the air, like, oh, you work,
you illustrator.
Yeah, totally, right. And then the opposite is there's kind of daggers we throw at each other, and this is not about that. This is kind of breaking down barriers and walls that very things that we kind of put. And I think, like with Beeple having his mega sale, becoming fine arts darling all of a sudden. It's changed the world, and if we're not having a dialogue, fine artists and more illustrators or entertainment or whatever, then I think we're missing out, because the art world is completely changed overnight in the last 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, to some people it's like the only thing that'll prove that it's real or something is real is like if it sells for a lot of money. It's like, oh,
right.
Oh, okay. It must be fine art.
Right.
It's like, okay, what was it before?
Right. Yeah. And so that's what we've gathered too, is artists that have that kind of a mindset, that more flexibility, rather than, it's like little denominations of religious groups that might hate each other.
Yeah.
Or maybe, this team hates that team or whatever. The conference is more about like dialogue between all of these different groups. And that's where that cross-pollination that's where the interesting stuff and the innovative stuff gets made, is in those people that are in-betweeners and find new threads to work on. So if you don't know who Zoe Frank is, definitely check her work out. It'll blow your mind. What she's done. Her show is up for an extra month, and that's rare to happen in any fine art space. Usually there's a strict schedule of your show only goes up a month, but it's been so popular and so many people have wanted to see it, they added it an extra month. And that's a Sugar Lift Gallery in New York. And Harvey, that runs the gallery there, he's going to be talking about, because they've really done some innovative things with gallery space. He's going to be talking about kind of the gallery in the 21st century. And they've done a lot of things to kind of step it up and interact in digital ways as well as traditional ways, and make the gallery space, relevant in the 21st century. So that'll be a great talk too, to make sure and see.
Yeah, I'm looking at Zoe Frank stuff. This is like exactly what's in right now. I think it's like it's got a lot a lot more abstract qualities to it. And I noticed, so I used to be part of Gallery Russia in Scottsdale, and they pretty much transitioned out of like really. Well, I think Gallery Russia doesn't even exist anymore. They went over to Paul Scott Gallery now, and it's all just like abstract stuff because the market for that like representational Russian type of art is just kind of died down, and people right now want, I think, this exact thing. So Zoe Frank, I think, is like, to me, this, when I see it, it's like, this is what people who like representational work probably want to put on their walls right now, right? Because it's got a much better decorative feel to it, but still very representational. Yeah. It's still very clearly a really, really skilled craftsman. Yeah, it's beautiful. I love it. It's cool.
Yeah, so she'll be kind of kicking off our event, or Vision X Live, with her keynote, where she talks about her program in an atelier, and you guys haven't run into each other, but I guess that's how it is. They're different groups and stuff. She did her undergrad at an atelier program with Juliet Aristides.
Okay.
And
yeah, I visited Juliet a few years ago.
Yeah, and then went to Laguna College of Art and Design, which I know you know well.
Yeah.
For her master's. And so that's where she got kind of exposure to different worlds. And anyway, that's kind of
nice.
Where this conference, I think, can be very helpful and beneficial to think through the abstract kind of concerns and things like that, as well as these traditional representational elements as well.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of my process too. Is I'm looking at these shapes and trying to balance out some of the the placement of things, and looking at just purely what is this shape doing next to this other one, and how are those interacting, and adding or deleting depending on that abstract quality. So if you zoom in on a little piece of it, it should be an interesting and dynamic composition on that small scale, as well as when you step back in a larger scale. So like in the foreground here, you can see I've redesigned the foreground elements. It looks like there's kind of a bed or something there that somebody's threw in the alleyway, and it's all yellow and white.
Yeah.
And if you look, that's a high contrast area. And if I painted it that way, with that high contrast and that yellowy color, what I'm going to kill the eye's ability to move past that area and go down the alleyway.
Yeah. So you want the light coming through in the open, what is it? The arch. That's your focal point, obviously, right? The little person probably, right?
Yep. Yeah. The person back there. So that's where I've got that green note, you see, with all the red around it. And then you've got that leading them down into that green note on the back of their shirt. That's the kind of the idea that this painting has taken on. And so what can I do to entertain and engage you as you're walking through that alleyway in a way that it's interesting but not overwhelming, to eventually leading you back to that space? And you can see there's some darks right next to that figure that kind of create, as well as kind of the archway, that shape, that strong circular shape with all the angles all around. Those kinds of things will help signal to you that this is kind of the area of most importance because of its uniqueness, its contrast, contrast in value and color and shape.
Yeah.
So a big part of this type of painting has a lot to do with your edge work. You have to be really mindful of how are you utilizing edges in order to move that eye through, from different objects. Where do you want it to glance over? Where do you want it to stop? Where do you want it to kind of maybe skip a little bit as you're heading to the kind of back in space?
Mm-hmm. You ready? Oh, so go ahead.
Yeah, one other thing is I have a very light touch to this. You can't be heavy-handed in a painting process like this. It's the feel of it would be like, a violin player, just the way they touch the strings. They know that they're doing certain things. So just the way that I'm putting these strokes on and the touch is a really important part of, getting that stroke and that loose quality to the work. So here I'm kind of cleaning off the palette just to, it's after a while things will get a little. I like that muddiness that I was telling you about a little bit, but at some point, it's the mixtures get too mixed. So then I scrape everything out and then kind of start back in with some fresh mixtures.
Cool. You ready for another question?
Yeah.
This one's kind of funny. It says, I'm at a disadvantage if I want to get better at drawing at age 13 instead of an earlier age. That's amazing.
That's amazing. You have a long life to live.
Yeah. Where's the disadvantage there? Wait, I mean, I started painting, like, trying to get good at painting at age 13 as well. And I see that as a huge advantage that I had in my life. Huge over other people where I actually, had oil paint. I had access to oil paint at age 13. That's an advantage. So, Wadeb, you do not have a disadvantage. Don't see it that way. Be thankful that you are already, on a community board where serious artists are studying and you're among them and you could start learning. I mean, you are young. You're very young and you got a long life ahead of you.
Absolutely.
No disadvantage. Yeah.
No, not at all. It's kind of the same thing too. Like if you have those years of learning a language,
Mm-hmm.
doing it before 20, you just have a much higher likelihood of speaking like a native.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do anything after year 20, probably earlier, probably it's around 15 maybe, the chance of you speaking like a native is really much lower. And so if you're in the 13-year range or younger and you're starting to draw and take an interest in it, you're just going to speak that language. It's going to be that much natural for you. Yeah.
At what age did you start getting kind of serious at it?
So I remember when I was 8, asking for a Bob Ross paint set.
Nice.
But really, my interest was because my parents enrolled me in an art academy when I was in 4th grade.
4th grade. So that's 10?
Yeah.
10 years old. Okay.
Yeah. So that was really when I started learning some things, even, about abstraction. I started to kind of understand what that was. It was all drawing for the most part, no painting, which was great. I think like with my kids, my oldest is 15, and for the most part, I don't let them paint much. First of all, it can be a total mess. But the other thing is, to some degree, what Da Vinci said is true, that you learn a lifetime to draw and one day to learn how to paint. So, there's some truth in that. Nowadays, painting, back when Da Vinci was painting, it was more like filling in a drawing for the part. Nowadays, like a painting like this, where you have to know kind of how thick the paint is and you have to time it right. And, I have to finish certain parts of this all in a certain time period. Otherwise, it'll be too dry to create certain strokes. So, that's why this whole first session that we're seeing, this is all, I haven't left my chair. I have to create all of this all in one session. Otherwise, I will not be able to achieve the quality that I'm achieving now if it's not all done just like this. So that's something that takes years of practice. Obviously, you got to know the end game, you know your mid game. It's like you see the chess move. A master would see it, 20 moves ahead or all the way to the end. That's how you need to see it, and that takes experience.
Yeah.
to do a loose technique like this. You have a really tight mind, a lot of thinking going on, and then you let your brush loose. So there's a kind of a dynamic between how you're thinking and processing this and how it's actually being executed. And, you know, just like a jazz musician, you need to be able to know your scales, know all those basics really well, so that when it comes time to do improv, you can just do it intuitively. And that's a lot of what this is improv. I'm just saying, I'm going to move this around right here. I like this shape, this. I like this stack this way. I want this color to be here, this edge to be sharper here or softer there. I'm making those decisions because of, you know, the years and years and the 10,000 paintings, you know, that I've done, and, you know, decisions made that worked, decisions that didn't, analyzing those decisions afterward. That worked because of this reason. That didn't work because of this reason. And then you do it better each time and more familiar each time.
Yeah. Next question comes from Yumi. How do you decide where you want to blend colors and where you want to keep the brushstrokes more pronounced? I love the rougher, expressive look for paintings, but never know when to stop refining.
Okay, so like in a painting, and like in this particular case, usually around the edges of the canvas, you are going to want to have less contrast, and you want to have softer edges, regardless of what you're seeing in the photo reference. And that's so that you can have your sharpest edges, your highest contrast, more towards the focal area of the painting, which is going to be somewhere in the midground, typically speaking. Mm-hmm. So that's why you can see in the foreground here, I'm not defining things in a real strong way. But as you lead back into space, you can see that those edges have sharper contrasts, and you know, it stops the eye a little bit more. So there, but what I'm doing, even though it may seem really random or spontaneous, I'm consciously creating that range of soft focus into sharp focus gradually as you go inch by inch towards that focus of the center of the painting. And so that takes some time to just kind of be, it's one of those things where you're trying to, you know, pat your head and rub your tummy at the same time. I think of several different things simultaneously as you're working on that. And you'll get more comfortable as you continue to practice. And what I recommend is start with single objects first, like with a still life. Just paint an apple or orange, and then add the second apple, and then add some elements that go along the edges. Mm-hmm. Make sure those things around the edges have softer contrast and softer edges, and then those things in the center stay true to that, you know, sharper edge. But start with simplicity first, and then build that complexity as you become comfortable with those initial objects. One object, then two objects, then three, then five, then 20, you know. Then you can kind of juggle all these things in your head a little bit better.
Cool. Laurel Beam says, good evening, Stan and Bryan. Bryan, when working on a painting, how do you personally know when you are overworking it or you just need to push through a tough spot? Are there signals to you that you should just stop painting it and move on?
Yeah, I think you'll feel with certain areas that if it gets to kind of bogged down where you're uncertain, that uncertainty comes through in the final painting. And so what I'll do, I think you've maybe seen quickly, I take a little scraper and scrape off an area back down to kind of the original bare canvas or bare panel, and then try it again. Because, you know, in this type of painting, overworking it is the death of it. And so I'd rather have it look more unfinished than overly done. All right, so now what just happened is we are in session number 2. So I took a break. It actually dried overnight, and now we're on kind of session number 2, where everything that has been really wet is not super wet anymore. And now I'm going to layer on some things over the top, a little refinement, in order to take it kind of to the finish line.
Okay, so now when you get your loose brush strokes, it's not going to mix in. Instead, you're going to get kind of a dry brush effect. Do you sometimes use that?
Yes.
Is that actually a thing you use often? Is the dry brush on top?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
And then there's that nice dynamic because the dry brush will kind of break up a little bit. It won't have that smoothness underneath.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something like, is the death also of a otherwise great digital painting. It looks too slick and too smooth everywhere. And that's why there's so many different textures and things, right? That you want to add to it. Or even with a drawing, you want to add some different tools or different things to give it a surface quality that's interesting. So what I don't do here, and what if you're overworking something, is you have to go back and redo a wash, like the ceiling there. If I had to go back and redo that ceiling with a different dark, say I screwed that up, there's a good chance that you'll just screw up the entire painting, and that's where you need to set it aside and start over and try it again.
Okay.
And so that's where when I talk about kind of that knowing the end game based on what you're doing in the beginning, those starts are really critical. They may seem just kind of random and flowy at first, but there's a certain thickness to it. There's a certain color temperature. There's a transparency. All those things I'm looking for at the beginning, so that when you lay stuff over the top, that transparency and that abstraction looks good underneath what you're putting on top of it.
Yeah. Okay. What do you look for when choosing a subject to paint?
So, great question. And one thing, like in workshops, I find that one of the hard things for an artist when they're going out like plein air painting is to choose something that is actually paintable. I know many people would look at this scene and think, this is not paintable.
Yeah.
And part of it is my desire, like, you eat enough chocolate chip cookies, you kind of get bored of them, and you want to have a chocolate chip with something like cayenne pepper or something in it, or something more challenging into it. And I guess to some degree, I feel I like the challenge of really complex paintings, but for the most part, is when you're starting to select a scene, and I would really look for something that has strong, clear shapes in it. So if we strip this all down, it just has, like I said at the beginning, it's just a hallway. So it's got 4 sides and an archway, and that's it. And so you really want to strip it down to those kinds of components. Or like a tree, it's a circle. A bush, it's kind of a circle or an oval. A mountain, it's a triangle. What you want to be looking for is strong contrast, clear shapes, and something, if it has a distinct value pattern of lights and darks, good shadows, big shadows, it's going to be a whole lot easier to paint. If you're looking for a subject, like, for instance, I'll have somebody in a workshop that will pick, they barely are learning how to oil paint, and they'll pick a winter tree, a tree that doesn't have any leaves on it. And so then they're all trying to paint all the little branches and things like that. And it's just a disaster, right? Because they don't know how to simplify it. And so I want them to pick a tree that's like fully has leaves on it, has a nice strong shape, maybe even like a bonsai type shape. And it just makes it 1,000 times easier to paint it. So pick things with simple shapes and strong contrasts, clear contrasts, and just makes it a lot easier. So, for example, snow scenes are great, other than the bare trees. Like pine trees and snow is a great, easy thing, because you got a dark pine tree that's got a generally triangular shape, and you've got the snow, which is really a very light value. And so if there's shadows on that, you see a real clear, easy contrast between light and shadow on that snow. And so you've got something that is a really easy paintable subject that you could paint, pine trees against the snow. So you're looking for that kind of thing wherever wherever you go. And the less overly complicated you can make it at the first, the better off you'll be. And what we say, it'll paint itself to some degree if you kind of select something like that.
Yeah.
So one of the things I like to go over, like in a workshop, is you want to go through a bunch of references and say, this works because of this, this, and this. This doesn't. Don't even try and paint this because it's going to foul you up because of X, Y, and Z. You know, this would foul up a lot of people just because, like, what do I do with that bed in the front and all that crap, that trash that's on the ground that's white, and all the different signs and things like that. Even the lights above, if I make them as light as I see them, that's too much contrast, and it will see how I've diminished the contrast up there.
It's like you turn the lights off. They're on in the photo, but you turned them off, and now they're just the plastic cover of the light.
Right, because I don't want it competing with what's going on behind it. So you're orchestrating all of that stuff. But if you can find a scene that kind of does those things for you a little bit more or less, makes it that much easier for you to kind of get some traction.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I could totally see how, without experience inventing that stuff that you invented in the front instead of the bed, that would be, it'd be impossible to invent that without already knowing how to invent stuff.
Yeah, you need to, because you got to have it in perspective, right? You got to have it somewhat believable in terms of what its shapes. And you can kind of see I'm utilizing some of the elements that are there, but just modifying, what I in the foreground, and changing the shape and maybe even the perspective of some things in order to have a little bit better line that leads to the focal point. That's one thing I find in cityscapes in general. If you're looking down the street, sometimes things are just going off in weird directions, but really the goal is to lead you down. It's like the Star Wars, Luke Skywalker tunnel thing. You want to make sure that the eye is kind of being led, maybe not too directly, or else it's just obvious and stupid. But you want to, have some of those lines eventually finding their way back in space. And you have to do that too, even if you're painting a field of grass, a little tuft of grass here or a rock there, and you create that pathway, that eye path that leads you in a kind of a zigzag pattern up into the scene. That same kind of thing happens here. So I treat this very organically, like it is a jungle, and it very much is an urban jungle. And so just because it's buildings and it has to follow this perspective, I would argue that the same thing has to happen in a regular landscape. You need to understand that perspective. You need to understand where those lines are going, so you can move the eye back in space. And so I do treat cityscapes more like a landscape, and I have a tendency to treat landscapes a little more structure like a cityscape. So I find the two, I think, to create some consistency also in my own work is I'm heading towards this kind of abstracted center, where I'm using a lot of straighter lines, straighten things off, certain angles as I kind of lead the eye into the piece.
Okay. Cool. Michelle asks, I've been making art for many years as a hobby, but I'm transitioning into attending school for fine art and trying to make art my profession. What do you think is the most important aspect of painting to master initially when starting to grow your skills? Perspective, composition, measuring, etc.
Well, all important, right? We could boil it down to kind of the big ones, right, that she mentioned. Obviously, perspective is one of the most underrated skills that artists need to have, and one of the most important. It's funny, like everybody's like, oh yeah, perspective is so important, and they kind of feel like since it was invented in the Renaissance that we all know it. We were born knowing how it works. But I find that a lot of people are really lacking the deep understanding necessary for linear perspective, to 1 point, 2 point, 3 point. really understanding how it works so that you can use it in a way, even if you don't have a reference, you can think three-dimensionally. So definitely an important skill, and not to gloss over. A lot of people do. There's occasionally you get somebody that just totally obsessed with it and will really take it to, an amazing degree. I'm not necessarily one of those people, but I was fortunate even in junior high as my teacher was obsessed with perspective, which in public education, that was probably the only good art training I had, was in understanding linear perspective. So that's one. Obviously, chiaroscuro, the light and shadow, understanding that there's form shadows that are soft, cast shadows are hard. Understanding that principle to a high level, and I think you still keep working on it. Stan, I'm sure you're still improving on it. I think everybody is, or finding new ways to do it, and to get really subtle gradations, or that perfect gradient as it turns the form. And people spend years figuring that out. So that's another one that's so critical. And also just understanding that dynamic between soft and hard edge, where the soft edges are on a form and where the hard edges are. I know you have a bunch of tutorials on that, as it relates to anatomy. One or two, right?
A few. Yeah, I got a bunch.
Perspective, chiaroscuro, understanding of atmosphere, very important. Things get lighter and bluer as they go back in space, generally speaking. But then there's all kinds of little extra rules or things that happen depending on where the sun is or the moon is, or what's going on in the atmosphere, how much pollution. That's one thing I found that's really interesting, traveling around the world and painting. There's different quality of light depending on where you are in the world, and also the elevation, the pollution levels, all those, moisture content, all those things have a bearing on atmosphere. That's something that you'd learn over time. Maybe not as critical as the other three that I've talked about initially, but that's something as specifically to an environment or landscape painter that you would want to definitely learn. So proportion, obviously understanding, how far distances are between things is something that you have to work on, and that takes time. And obviously, if you're going to be a figure painter, you want to understand proportion. But it's also true here, you want to understand proportion, because as you're designing and inventing, whether it's a tree or a rock, where do you make your initial rock shape? Where do you put the break? Where do you break that rock into other shapes? Like Scott Christensen, he's going to be at Vision X Live. He's a master in knowing where to break up rock shapes or where to break up tree shapes and stuff like that. And that same kind of understanding of proportion is something that helps you understand how to make a beautiful figure. Is where maybe you're also stretching the legs a little bit longer. Obviously, you don't want the head too big, but you could also get away with maybe that head a little bit smaller than normal, to create a certain effect. Understanding good proportion, but also how you can manipulate it for your needs.
Yeah, Francisco has a proportion question. Whenever I go straight into painting without an underdrawing, my proportions come out messed up. Any tips for fixing that?
Okay.
My first thought is do an underdrawing.
Yeah. I think it's important to keep doing underdrawings until you feel comfortable. Again, what I'm showing here is kind of an advanced painting method. This is part of my advanced class at Sentient Academy. Gallery paintings, and so that's why we kind of dispensed with the drawing and did something really complex like this. But if you're kind of getting started and you're having issues with kind of getting whacked out with all the proportions, one thing you can also do is have your reference right across from what you're painting and have that reference the same size, so you can see where you're getting off on your proportions. That's something that like the Florence Academy of Art does a lot to kind of help people develop that sense of proportion. They do, the site size thing where they have, the the reference right here, and even flat, like a Proudhon drawing, they'll have it right there, and you're just supposed to basically copy it and kind of measure the whole thing. So a little bit of that work is necessary. You could do that for years until you kind of really nail it down. It takes time and practice to do that. I don't think we were necessarily born with that ability of having that exact proportion. It's something that our minds can develop as we train.
Yeah. Let's see. I've always faced problems dealing with the negative space in my drawings and paintings. What kind of practice should I do to make an interesting negative space? Also, which doesn't take focus from the main subjects? Waiting for your answer. He's still waiting.
Right. Well, when you're looking at the negative space, one thing you can do to practice is silhouettes against the sky. So instead of drawing the trees, draw the shapes, draw the sky, basically. Mm-hmm. Draw the clouds, or the sky between the clouds, not the clouds themselves. So then you start to get this more of an understanding of what those negative shapes are doing to the positive shapes by looking at the distance, the background behind the objects. Because what you want to make sure and have is that there is a variety of spacing between each of these objects that you're painting or drawing. So like you have a bunch of trees, you want to look at, overall general contour of that tree, but its relationship to a tree that's next to it. What's the spatial difference between those two, and start to figure out, what that space is. Another kind of way of doing that is you can get, go Google interesting fence lines or broken down fences. So if you look at the slats of a fence, and if it's broken down, they're going in different directions. There may be different spacing between those slats. That's the kind of thing that you're trying to think about. And here in this piece, I'm thinking about those like these pillows or couches or bundles of stuff. I'm thinking about the spaces between each of them and making sure that there's some variety there between all those, every little space, that I have no two areas that have kind of the exact same space, right next to each other.
Yeah. And in general, I mean, I get a lot of questions like in this kind of format, where it's like, what should I do to practice this thing, whatever it is, whatever the problem is? And it's like, the answer is do that thing, right? Just keep practicing doing what that problem is, and keep trying to get it right, and study other artists that do it well, try to copy them, and then eventually you'll get it. It's like, it's not like there's an exercise for every single problem that we're going to run into. Usually it's just going to be about putting in the time and the effort to practice and get it right.
Well, and I think, along the lines that you said, there are like if you're working on color, then you work on color. But if you're not working on color, do this painting in black and white. Don't add complexity if you don't need to.
Right.
And so go to the simplest. If you're just doing linear perspective, forget about value. Just draw your lines.
Yeah.
And do exercises of just drawing the lines. So it's about paring down all of the elements. So, in a painting like this, I'm using everything. I'm using all the things we talked about, from chiaroscuro to edges to texture to color to, saturation to, everything, right? But if I wanted to study areas like this and just learn about the perspective, I'd have a ruler and a pencil. That's it.
Yeah. If you're trying to learn how to design shapes and your negative shapes, forget about painting, right? Get a sketchbook out and start designing shapes like that, and figure out how to design, like you said. The fence one is a really good one, because typically the tendency there is to just like make a bunch of vertical boards, and it's boring. But if you look at all the little subtle differences between all the negative space, but you would do that with a pencil, study it, and yeah.
Like Egon Schiele, the creepy
Mm-hmm.
drawings and but
Yeah.
houses and stuff that were, in a house, the series of the landscapes, just look at the spatial relationships in those drawings. It's so dynamic, so interesting, even though it's
Okay.
kind of a flat subject for the most part. But the understanding of spatial relationships is really, really well done. And I think in a sense, he isolated that, flattened things out, and was just looking at the abstract spatial relationships between things. So like with positive negative space, maybe don't even think about linear perspective or worry about that. Flatten everything out and just look at the flat shapes and how they interact with each other.
Mm-hmm.
So that, in that case, chiaroscuro is not something you'd care about, in that it just make every shape flat and fill it in. So you can judge shape against shape.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Connor asks, do you have any thoughts on handling frustration or advice for people who become discouraged because of the gap between mind's eye painting versus what gets on the canvas? I'm trying to learn oil after 20 years of acrylic work, and my own frustration and impatience are killing me.
Yeah, it's that's where, again, I think you go back down and pare it down to a smaller task. Like if you're taking off more than you can chew,
Mm-hmm.
like you're trying to paint the complex subject at the beginning, you're going to overwhelm yourself. Go back down to the simple object.
Yeah.
And get comfortable with that simple object first before you add the second object into the scene. And so that's where I think you can get wins a lot easier if you have that kind of simple subject. And that's one of the things why I started the Strata Easel Challenge, which we do twice a year in January and in September.
Mm-hmm.
Is that we have, people kept asking me about, how do I improve, and get this question a lot. And so that's why we got it, 30 days, just select something really simple. And I kind of lead by example. I do still life that whole month, where I do one a day,
Mm-hmm.
one single simple object, and just paint that one a day for 30 days. And I mean, that's been really beneficial for me, let alone, other people that.
Was that another day? I saw it flash. Does that mean it's now the third day?
I think we must have finished.
Well,
I don't know. Maybe
it's still going.
Flashed it. It's still going. Okay, then we're.
Maybe it was just an editing issue.
Oh, that's true. We are. So right now I'm putting in a few dark accents,
mm-hmm.
and that's one of the things that you're doing at the very end. You see, there's little highlights and dark accents to kind of finish it off. I hold back on any highlights or dark accents till the end. I try and keep everything more in a middle value range, because then you can decide as you're finished and you've developed your focal point to some degree, where do you want to put that little extra oomph in order to make it work.
Yeah, that's a good idea. You reserve a little bit of value range for the end. Otherwise, you got nothing else to work with to really push something more. That's good.
And a lot of people think I need to have more contrast. It's actually not true. It's the opposite. You need to have less contrast through most of the painting. And it's towards the end that you want to have that contrast. Because what they're trying to do is they're putting contrast here and there and everywhere in the painting, and all just canceling itself out. And they're like, why can't I process this image? Well, it's visual overload when you have like a million highlights on every single. And I see this a lot in a plein air workshop, is highlights all over every tree, the leaves, because they're looking at that and seeing the light flash off the slick surface of that leaf, and it creates that kind of little spark, and putting little sparks on all this stuff, and it just becomes a total mess.
Yeah, you got to have contrast of contrast.
Yeah.
So areas of a lot of contrast and areas of less contrast. So you have contrast of contrast. Otherwise, it's like you said, it's a mess.
Ironically, the large majority of the painting, 80% of it needs to be less contrast,
Yeah.
not more.
Yeah. You were talking about your Strata easel challenge. I'm curious, how long do you spend on a typical still life painting for when you do it every day for a month? Like how many hours a day do you spend on it?
Oh, I mean, probably an hour, hour and a half.
Okay.
And then, occasionally I'll do something crazy like a typewriter, antique typewriter. That'll take me, I got to be honest, that'll take me about 6 hours to do that.
6 hours. Jeez.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't do that stuff like that often, but occasionally I get crazy and I find something on eBay and I got to paint it,
Right.
But I try not to, it's all about being true with the kind of the colors and values that you're seeing. It's not necessarily needing to be true to all the details.
Yeah.
Little nuances. If I kind of capture the essence of it, my first read is like, oh, that just feels like natural, like how the eye would see something. That's kind of what I'm after, and that's that training that I'm after to kind of improve things. That when I go to something like this, it's really complex. I can mix those values really quick, know what I'm after, and hopefully help other people to kind of do the same, learn the same.
Yeah.
But it's not like it's supposed to take over your life. Just spend an hour a day on it. Some artists, even less time, they'll even draw instead of paint. And that's, a great tool. All we're trying to do is to help people, every single day be accountable to a group of other artists to post something, to do something from life and post. And it's really helped ignite a lot of people to, get over some of these blocks that they're having.
Let's see. Wayne says, do the type of brushes that you use in digital painting really affect your painting? Yeah.
Oh, because I'm looking at maybe a digital image and then using that as reference to do my painting, maybe is what they're saying. I don't know.
Not sure. Do the type of brushes you use in digital painting really affect your painting? I don't know if it has anything to do with the reference. I think he's saying, does it matter which brush I choose in Photoshop, or do I just pick one and start? I don't know. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's not the most important thing. I mean, you could do a beautiful painting with any brush. I mean, almost. But I mean, brushes do make a difference in the effect you'll get. So if you're going for a specific look, then yes, the brush will matter. But if it's just a general question of, do I have to have a specific brush to get a good result, then the answer is no. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And look, there's so many different artists, and they're all doing fantastic work, and every single one of them is using a different brush. They all have, everybody's got their preference.
Yeah,
I have a preference here. So I think the brush choice is more just about what you happen to like, rather than, is that going to make the painting higher quality? No. Your understanding and knowledge of art and making good imagery is going to do that. But will it give it maybe some distinctness if you do something crazy with a brush? Or yeah, it could. But for the most part, I think, and I have a friend that he seems to switch his stuff around. Like, I'm using this brush and this palette, but throughout the years, I haven't discerned a lot of difference, like no major breakthrough that has occurred because they switch their materials all throughout the years, whether it's liquid, a brush, a surface. It all still just kind of looks like their work. What I've seen though over time is the choices you make, because you know more about art and more experience over time. Those are the real substantial differences that I think occur in this work.
Yeah, cool. We haven't talked about your painting in a while. Is there any update to the stage or?
Okay, so you can see that red at the beginning. It's not that kind of strong red anymore.
Yeah.
I've graded off a little bit. And again, there's that kind of underneath quality. It's hard to see in this, obviously, and digitally in this image, it's a little soft as well. But you can see kind of the final image. I've posted it on Instagram if you want to take a look at that. But even also seeing it in person, one thing I like to have is some of that red underneath as it shows through. When a gallery light hits the painting, you have a nice, rich dynamic of color of the warmth underneath, the coolness on the top, that creates extra depth in the painting that it's hard to kind of fully appreciate here digitally. And that's why paintings are meant to be seen in person. Unfortunately, a large majority of the people that ever see my work and your work are going to see it digitally, but that's why you need to get out and go to a gallery, see the work in person. It's a totally different experience to see it that way.
Yeah, it is.
And just the way you read it, like a painting of mine, I like to tell people it's an interactive experience. It's all about seeing it from like 10 feet away and then getting up really close to it and just seeing everything is just completely abstract. Like you can see all this brushwork, and it's not until you kind of step back that the image snaps into place. And it's that interesting dynamic that I really like in loose artwork that you don't find as much in some tighter things. It's great work too. It's just, anyway, personal preference that I like to have that experience of going up to a painting and just like, wow, how did those random strokes become, this object when you see it from a distance.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe you could also post this final painting in your under this lesson in the video on Proko so people can.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do that for sure.
Yeah. And then I'm pretty sure we have links to your Instagram on your profile in Proko as well. Yeah. If you go to Bryan's profile on Proko, there's a link to his Instagram as well. So lots of cool stuff there. All right. So Lig asks, when making an environmental drawing, what things should one focus on? Also, if you want to be a concept artist designing environments, what are most things that all industries look for when designing environments?
Oh, interesting. Well, I think understanding how to take any type of scene and create an area of real interest and contrast in the midground. So it doesn't matter if, as a concept artist, you're going to be doing lots of different things. You're going to be who knows what environment you're going to be working on. A lot of it could be post-apocalyptic. That seems to be a large theme, right?
Yeah.
Or you're developing scenes that have a very specific cultural identity to it, whether it's Moana and Hawaii, or it's Blade Runner and LA is a dump city. There's going to be a specific cultural identity. So understanding cultures and being understand their forms and their shapes is I think important. But more often than not, it's about taking whatever materials that you can gather and then creating that strong focal point. So that's, again, with the sharp edges, the sharp contrast, creating that creates the story. So if any great animated film, you'll see that they have that light, that beam of light that comes down and illuminates, the important part of the scene. There's lots of creative ways to do that, whether it's an open door or it's just a shaft of light peeking through the clouds. That's one of the main ways, understanding how light works in an environment is just a critical skill that's kind of universal, no matter what type of scene you're doing.
Cool. What kind of things should I consider when I want to work on my brushwork?
Okay, so the main thing with the brushwork is you want to pick the biggest brush that you think you can handle, and then set it down and get a bigger one.
And then I get a bigger one. How much bigger? The next up?
Yeah, just always go to when you have a choice between a smaller brush and a bigger brush, use the bigger brush and learn how to use it creatively.
Yeah. The corner. You just use the corner a lot when you need details.
Yep. Using the corner, using, and sometimes I have to remind myself, I get mad at myself for picking up that small brush. And no, I don't want, go back to that bigger brush, because your brush stroke is going to be much more dynamic and interesting if you have a larger stroke for the most part. Now, towards the end, like right in the final moments, you can see I have a little bit smaller brush here in order to tease a couple little edges with a little bit of refinement here and there. And, that's towards the end. But sometimes what I'll do, even if I go to this small brush, I can maybe noodle around and mess something up. And so then I go back to that bigger brush and then unify some of those strokes.
That one's really small. You got the tiny.
Yeah. So with all this broad strokes, a couple little touches, those little tiny touches are what create that illusion of detail without putting any detail in there.
Right.
And so this is all about the illusion at this point. Just little tiny touches. And what this is a little bit of a payoff when you get up close, that there's some little things also to notice in the piece. So again, it's all about that kind of dynamic. The big shapes, the big values are going to read from a distance really well. Then when you come in close with some of these smaller kind of details, that's where you get a little bit of a payoff.
Cool. All right. Looks like we got...
The first time I got this out, this is the painting. This is after, the second day of painting. And it's used very sparingly.
Yeah.
So don't start busting this out right.
Yeah, it's once you've already got the effect, you're pretty much done. You just add those little notes.
Yep.
Nice. Okay, we've come to the last question. How do you deal with persistent mental blocks? I can start anything, but halfway through, I always end up losing my vision.
Oh, yeah. I think a big part of that, personally, is that if you're doing it from photos, it's just really hard to be engaged. And so if I start getting disengaged from art, either I'm booking a flight to some random country, or I'm just going outdoors and in my backyard or anywhere that I can go and engage with life again and capture it while you're, in that moment. There's nothing better than just, stepping outside your door, or you could take an interesting object and just light it in a way that kind of stimulates you. There's something that is alive about all of that experience that in a photographic reference it can be really dead. And so I think that's it's really hard for me to find somebody that is standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon to not feel somewhat inspired, if they're an artist, to not want to do something about that experience. And so that's you need to reconnect with life, things that are alive, and or invite or get somebody to sit for you to draw or to paint. There's also that immediacy that object's going to move or leave or light's going to change, that helps kind of get you past some of those blocks too.
Yeah, there's nothing like traveling though to bring back the inspiration and get rid of those mental blocks. you go to a new country you've never been to before, like it's always life changing, right? Like it's not, I mean, not like life changing, but like you always come back like, well, what was that? That was different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And
the smells, the sights, just the people chattering.
Yeah.
As soon as you step off the plane, and it's just a different vibe, and your eyes are re-stimulated again. It's almost like you get to see like a child sees again, right?
Yeah.
When I see it snow, I'm not like blown away. But when we moved from California to Utah and it started snowing, all my kids were jumping up and down, so excited to go out and play in the snow. And that's the kind of experience or the feeling we need to have to kind of get us going. And I found that traveling is really the biggest way that I can re-stimulate that desire to create.
Yeah. Nice. Let's see. So that was, I think that was the last question. Let me double check. Yeah, I think there might be one more. There's one on time management, actually. How do you manage your time to paint and post consistently when your artwork has various elements and details to paint? I wish I could post more often and finish a full painting in less time. Thanks.
Well, I think, the more you get as an artist, the more you do your thing, the faster you get at it. It's like, I've been in, some lines where we were helping with food distribution for homeless and things like that. And one of the things I notice is that, I'll jump in with some other volunteers and we're kind of like fumbling around a little bit, but I guarantee you in 15 minutes time, we've got a rhythm and we're just like, throw this and this. And so you kind of need to figure out a rhythm, right? A rhythm that works for you and try and develop some of that consistency. So like, that's what the Strata challenge that we do is good for, is that it helps you understand what it takes to have some of that consistency, because you paint or draw something from life and then you have to post it every single day, or else you get eliminated from the race, basically. And so that pressure helps you. It's just like a conveyor belt going by and you're trying to, put together the widgets or whatever. You start to figure out a way to make it work. And just that consistency over time will help you. So if you, set a 30-day challenge yourself, if you don't join, the Strata challenge or like Inktober or something like that, and commit to yourself to do it every day. One thing that's nice about doing it in a larger group is you feel like you're part of something, and that kind of weight kind of carries you along. So that's kind of why I recommend those kinds of things. But that's for the consistency.
Cool. Yeah. How much longer is on this paint? I think it seems like we're like at the very end here based on the time, but I can't.
At the very end. So just mention here right at the. So here's my big brush coming out.
Yeah. Okay.
and so simplifying maybe some of these passages.
Okay. So some stuff that you've overworked, you're going back over and simplifying it again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so at this stage of the painting it's just a little bit more tedious, and it's not slow. Like at the beginning, we saw it come together like pretty quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's very fast painting. Now this is all about creating in my mind, something that's enough quality to go in a gallery. Is these subtleties that need to happen because it's going to be, shown under a light. It's going to be scrutinized. Somebody's going to have to pay a lot of money for it. So, I want to make sure that I've really taken care of, some of the things, and again, without overworking at it. So I'm working all around, just a little touch here and there. This needs to be softened. This needs to be sharpened. This shape didn't quite happen the way I wanted it to, but still you can see that I'm making these kind of decisive strokes. Little touches here and there that bump the quality up.
Mm-hmm.
And add just kind of this little degree of finish to it.
Yeah, I saw you using the corner of a giant brush to do a very small stroke just now.
Yeah, exactly. So that's that's the abstraction too. So one thing I can mention here, as far as abstract painting goes, if I ever taught a class on abstract painting, which I may do at some point, it's all about, you know, creating that chaos and then taking a big roller and eliminating 90% of it. Then creating the chaos again, eliminating a bunch of it, you know, and then that layering process, you finally come up with something that's interesting. And these layers and that dynamic base going back and forth between the minutia, the textures, the little nuances, and then those big broad areas.
Yeah.
Madness. And a little bit of that is also happening here on this scale.
Nice. Cool. Well, let's conclude it here. You got, what's that?
I think we can stop it at this point. I think we've covered.
Well, we'll let it roll, and as we do a little outro here. So again, you guys go check out visionxlive.com. It's a new conference. Is it conference or convention? I never know the difference.
We're calling it more of a conference, I guess you could say. It's
what is the difference
between a convention and conference? I think convention seems more salesy, more like, like the sales floor is more important than the actual content.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
That's my feeling. And this is where the content, of course, we have some great sponsors.
Oh, it ended. Okay, John, you could switch back to our double view. Thank you.
We have some incredible sponsors, and they're going to have some great products that they're going to be showing, of course. And some great galleries that are also a part of the event as well. But really, it's about these big ideas that are being shared, and people talking about not only their craft, but also like, what do they think the future of the art world is going to look like? What are they doing to bring that about? So those kinds of things will be discussed in detail from some really smart minds.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, I'll be there. I'm doing 2 panels, not 3, 2. So yeah, if you guys want to see my panels or the 90 plus other artists that are going to be doing stuff, go check out visionxlive.com. And then of course, go check out Bryan's work on Instagram. I've been following you for a long time now. Love your stuff.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. And thanks for coming on.
No, this has been fun.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Those were all really, really good answers. I was taking notes, actually. I was like, oh shoot, there's a lot of questions that people ask me all the time that you had good answers for. So thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah.
All right.
So,
well, it's been a pleasure.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks a lot, man. John.